Hello everyone, thanks for coming. I want to step through a few slides at the beginning just to set the playing field, and then we'll move into a demonstration of the product. So the main thing that EDM Library really has to offer is the ability to work with data over multiple sites and to work with lots of data to get that where it needs to be and to make it simple and quick for those who need to work on that to have access to what they need. So, for example, starting off with the librarians, they can be in multiple locations. They can work on a local sandbox of the library, maybe a subset of the library, just work on the parts that apply to them. And then when they're done with their work, they can easily push that into a central library structure. And also, we can feed into that central library structure bill of material information, detailed part data. We can pull data from the internet. We can also pull data from other databases and make that available in part of the part creation flow. Then we want to push that on down to the engineers, and the engineers also can be in multiple locations. They can have their own library specifications to define different subsets of the library that they're interested in. Their local libraries are updated automatically so that they don't have to worry about whether they've copied the latest down to their system or not. They can also get local copies for their own machines if they need to work offline, all based on the library specifications that they need. Let's focus though first on the library section and their working environment. Here we are in the Expedition EDM Librarian tool. This is a lot like the regular Expedition Librarian tool. There's just some additional functionality here to support the EDM flow. One thing to point out that's a major difference is that we're working in a sandbox. We don't have the entire library here. I mean, you have the option to bring the whole library down if you want, but in this case I just got a few parts that I've been working on here and there. Some of these partitions are completely empty. There are parts for these partitions in the main library, but let's say I'm working remotely. I don't want to be connected through a VPN to the library the whole time. I just want to be working on my stuff where I'm at, and that speeds up my building process, makes things easier for me. So I've just built a sandbox library, and I've imported the parts that I want to use. To do that import, I just right click on here and say add to sandbox. That will go off and talk to the server and show me what's available there. So let's say I look at the IC library. We'll run a search here through all the ICs. You can see there's different partitions we can search on. So, maybe I'm working on a particular part and I know there's one in the library that's kind of close to what I need to build. So you can go ahead and grab that. I'll just grab everything that applies to that. It'll be the part, the symbol, the cell, and the pad stack. And let's see, this is part 78, just to keep track of that. So we can go ahead and say OK. And that'll go ahead and load that into my local library here. Alright, so we can see now that that's in here. We'll go ahead and close that window. There's this part 78 that I was working on. And inside there we've got the symbol and the cell now. So now I can take those. I can maybe make a copy of that and start working on some new part. Let's go ahead and just label that whatever we're moving to here, and there's a little icon there by the part letting me know that hey, this is a new part. It's not in the library. When I get done, I can go ahead and add to the EDM server, and that will add that to the main library for others to work off of. The nice thing here is that I can kind of do whatever I want. I don't have to worry about my playing around with parts and doing stuff. I don't have to worry about that affecting the library as a whole. I just check in the parts that need to be checked in, and the rest of the stuff I keep to myself and work on it here and get it up to snuff. Let's go ahead and push this one to the server. I'll just say new part, nothing fancy there. OK, and then I'll go ahead and load that up into the EDM library so it'll be available for the users to get access to. Now within the library structure itself, there is a release status that says this part's still under development, or it's been approved and released, or it's obsolete. And I have access to that kind of information here. So there's the set release status. Right now it's still in development. I go ahead and say that's an approved part, and that will then be available for the end users to get access to. It could be obsolete if obviously it became an obsolete part. You can actually add additional statuses to the list, but those are the default ones that come with the tool. One thing you might notice, there's some extra tabs up here in the navigator tree area. One of them is called requests. This links to a part request system that the end users can use. Let's say an engineer needs a new part. He can submit a request, and that'll show up here in the library tool. Let's go ahead and step through that process right now. All right, here we are now in the EDM Parts Request Manager. As you can see, this is a web-based application, so we just need to go on the internal internet to this page, and then we can submit a new part request. Just click on the button up here and identify which library we want this added to. This part request form can be modified if there's additional fields that your company wants to have in here. Let's just put in a part number that we're after, something like that. If there's attachments like a data sheet for the part, that'd be helpful. Or maybe if the end user already built a symbol that he liked, he could attach that. Whatever the case may be, he can throw that in there and then hit submit, and that will be available then for the librarian. So let's jump back to the librarian view and see what he's going to see. Alright, you can see that since we've left, there's been a couple of part requests that's come in. Let's go ahead and look at the latest. Right now it's just submitted, and so I can go ahead as the librarian and say, well, yeah, that one looks like one. I don't recognize that part number. We'll approve that. I need to type in my password for the system and put I got this and hit OK. Now you can see it's moved from step A on to step C. There was a step B in there that it took care of itself automatically. So that the part request does have a flow to it. It goes from A to B to C and so forth. Some of it can be parallel, some of it has to be sequential. In this case, we are now looking at going out and adding the part data, the cell data, the symbol data, and pad stack. Anyway, so the librarian can just work through that flow, building up the part, and when he gets done with that, he can submit it as we shown earlier, and the part will then be in the system and ready for the end user to take use of. Okay, here at the part request form, I'm going to go ahead and find that part that's been accepted. You can see down at the bottom here, there's some tabs, so the person who submitted this can come in and see, has there been cells assigned, pad stack assigned, symbols assigned, components, and what information is there that's already done. At this point, we haven't done anything yet, so it's still kind of blank, but that is a way that the person who submitted the request can get some feedback on what's going on. All right, we've talked about the librarian space and their job in getting parts into the EDM library space. Eventually, we're going to need to add some additional information, part data, part list information, so where the parts are used, some internet information, so part databases that are online, or enterprise data, which could be internal databases for part information. Some of this is entered in manually. A lot of it can be linked up with automation, but this all adds to a fuller picture for the designer to work off of. So let's go look at that now. And this last tab is the Components tab. This is where we have pointers to the parametric data within the library itself. So back here on the Libraries tab, we have access to the part information. This is a part meaning how the symbol and the cell are linked together. There is the symbols and cells and pad stacks. but the parametric data about the part, that is stored in a component section of the library. Go ahead and click on one of these and say View an EDM Library Cockpit. That will show us the parametric data that's saved for this particular part. So we can see here on this page we've got obviously the part number, there's a description, there's information about when it was created and who created that part. There's the graphics that are involved, so you can see there's also a little highlighter to show you how the pins are connected. There is additional parametric data about the part back here. These tabs that are in here are configurable, so you can add additional tabs if you want. I've got manufacturer information. There's history tracking, so it keeps track of the changes on the part and what's happened there as it's developed over time. There is also a search reference tab on all the parts, and this kind of runs throughout the library, and it gives you an idea of where whatever you're looking at fits in with the rest of the design process. So right now we're looking at this particular capacitor. We can go ahead and look under the mapping section. We can see what cells used here with this, and then with that we can see what pad stack is being used. So then you might want to relate that pad stack back and see what other parts are using that same pad stack. There's also information down to the bill of materials, also variant bill of materials. So if I want to see which designs use that particular part, I can browse through and see that here in this interface. And a manage block section. So if I've got managed blocks, this is kind of reuse function. If I have managed blocks that are using that part, I can see which ones are using that. So that's a nifty way to see where used type of data about the part. Anyway, when we're creating the part in the library, we'd also come here to this interface and add in the additional information, description and capacitor value and tolerance and so forth here. There's also the ability to link to 3D models in this space, and then this will also link into additional databases. So if you've got an enterprise database with part information, maybe purchasing information, whatever, we can link that information back here and make that all visible through this view right here. And we do have some customers where we've gone ahead and linked this up to some internet sites with component data, so that is also visible and available to view if engineers want to come in here and browse through the parts. We get the part data in place, and then the last part here is to push that on to the engineers. We need to both get the data to them where they're at, and then also get them a way to browse through the information and make good use of that. So let's see how that process works for them. Alright, this is the classic view for browsing through and looking at parts and adding component data in. But we do have a new interface that we've introduced recently. Alright, this is that newer interface. This is, as you can see, a web-based view. So we can come through and view the parts. We go ahead and click on a part number. We get the detail about that, all the fields that we were looking back in that other interface. Now we're seeing them here in a web-based view. We can get additional information about the library parts that are being used. And we can also place parts from this web view onto the schematic. So we're hoping that a lot of users, end users, would like to migrate to this view to view parts and get a feel for what's available in their library. Let's play around a little with this. Let's say I want to look for a capacitor. Come in here and I'm looking for 1 microfarad. Go ahead and search on that. You can see at the top we've got those that best match that with 1 microfarad. Further down we got some that meet the search criteria but aren't of that value. So I'm not sure which one of these I want. I can go ahead and do a comparison on those. Look at the data compare, it'll bring those up. And we can see what the differences are in these different 1 microfarad capacitors. And again, once we find the one that we're after, we can go ahead and place that in the schematic from here. Let's go ahead and place one of these parts down. I'll go ahead and select the first one. I'm going to minimize this a bit so that I can see my layout or my schematic at the same time. Just go ahead and grab that part, drag it down here to the search window, and it narrows down on that one, so then we go ahead and place that. I want to do a little bit of behind the scenes work here. So we talked about getting the library out to multiple librarians. It could be the case that even the librarians themselves want different parts in their libraries. Maybe one of them needs military grade parts, or another guy needs RoHS compliant parts only, and they don't want to see everything else. Or it's a huge company and the library is ginormous and you just want to narrow it down to the type of parts you need. Anyway, under the Expedition EDM Library Cockpit, we can come into a section here under Library Administration called Production Library. And this is where you can define your different libraries and the components that you want inside of those. So there's a number of ways to set this up, manually choosing which components go in there or automatically choosing parts based on a certain characteristic. But this describes what's going to end up in that final library that the engineers are looking at. This is it also has things like manage blocks, models, any additional files. So everything that you are going to need in a final library, because what the tool is actually going to do in the end is it's going to use a tool to pull a library out of this vault that we're looking at and build a standalone library structure that Expedition's used to looking at. But we can keep that updated from the vault. So let me pull up the tool for that. All right, this is the EDM Library Cache Manager, and I'm running this from the GUI, but this can also be run from a command prompt, so you can automate this to run as a cron job. Maybe run it every hour, every 6 hours, or every night. However often you want the tool to go through and update the libraries. You can see that is one of the options here, to update an existing central library. So ideally you would just set up a number of cron jobs that point to the various libraries that you want to have updated, and from there you define which production library spec that you want to use to update that library with. And by just doing an update, it's not going to copy the entire library over. It'll just look at what's in that library and update it with the new parts. Whatever's changed will be sent over. So it's a pretty small package that gets sent over for the update. So it's a quick process, but it keeps all these libraries up to date. And users on their end, they can run this as well. So maybe they want to get a current library on their laptop before they go off on the road, or maybe they're going to be working at home and they want to have a library on their system there, so they can run this the Library Cache Manager and update their local library quickly and keep it up to date with whatever's going on. So that's another beauty of this whole process, is that ability to get the library updated and have it where you need it and based on the specifications that you want. So in summary, the key is that we can have librarians in multiple places doing their job, getting the data into the system. The data that goes into the system can come from various locations, and we get all that information together and then disperse it out to the engineers where they're at in a manner that's easy for them to work with and quick to figure out where to move to next. So hopefully you see how the Expedition EDM library tool can be a core to the success of an Expedition flow. Thanks for your time.